Well, the cuckoo, she's a fine bird. She sings as she flies. She brings us glad tidings, while she tells us no lies. Well, hey everybody, we had some interesting commentary come up in the Patreon group, and our friend Trish, well, she said a lot of interesting things, and I'm going to try to keep this to the point. But you know, one thing that caught my eye is she said, as a Californian, I don't know why I'm so obsessed with this music, except that it speaks to my soul as an expression of universal struggle. Well, Trish, I could not agree with you more. That's one of the reasons why I'm obsessed with it, is it speaks to my soul as an expression of universal struggle. Everybody struggles, all living things struggle. And I know that, you know, from my brief experience as a human on this planet, I feel as though my whole life has been one big struggle. I think everybody's life is just a struggle. And it's all relative, you know. Some people struggle with war, disease, and famine. I mean, you know, most of us here in America, we struggle with careers, family, you know, internal struggles and stuff. You know, a little bit of oppression sometimes, depending on who you are in this country, right? But anyhow, so if our lives are one big struggle, the best we can hope for is that they're punctuated by a steady series of happy, meaningful moments, right? And to me, the banjo is like the jackpot of meaningful moments. I can create a meaningful moment anytime I want just by picking up this instrument. I don't need anybody else around me, although that makes it better. But yeah, I mean, this thing is just like a gold mine of meaningful moments. It can bring happiness too. But to me, you know, happiness is sort of a fleeting thing, that I don't place as much value in happiness as I do in authenticity. And that would bring me to this other point that I wrote down too. Trish wanted me to elaborate on something that I said. And we were talking about, you know, playing in a band versus playing solo. And Trish observed that most of her favorite banjo players, traditional banjo players, as she would describe them, they don't play in a band. They play either solo or with just one other person, like a duet type thing. And so what I said is that certain things conspire against our ability to play with others, especially if we are trying to live this music authentically. So what do I mean by authenticity when it comes to this old music? You know, basically living this music authentically to me means you're drinking alcohol and you're partying hard and you're working hard. And unfortunately, to me, this music is wrapped up in a lot of violence too. So those are four things that can be very negative in your life: drinking, partying, working, and violence. Violence is always bad. You know, and drinking alcohol is pretty much always bad. I don't believe that any amount of alcohol is good for us. I still drink on occasion, but I try never to drink to excess. But I can't escape the fact that for thousands of years, you know, ever since human culture has developed agriculture, you know, immediately after agriculture, maybe even before agriculture, we developed fermentation. So we've been drinking alcohol for a long time, and it's gone hand in hand with song and dance and musical instruments and stuff too. So you can't escape the intoxicating drug aspect of this. And for our tradition, you know, traditionally Appalachian Afro Scots-Irish music, that drug of choice has been alcohol, usually, usually straight liquor, which is a dangerous thing. So that's what I mean. I mean, think about it. When you're drinking, partying hard, working hard, and actually fighting people once in a while, man, that's counterproductive to a lot of bands. It'll drive you away from other musicians if you're partying too hard, or if you're working too hard, or if you're fighting too much, or at all. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. And I've got this story in my mind, guys, that I want to tell you for some reason. I can't get it out of my head whenever this subject came up. And I want to tell you all, maybe you don't know. If you don't, I want to inform you about the story of a young man named Amadé Ardoin. Now, Amadé was a young, black, I guess you'd call him a Creole, down in Louisiana. He was a wonderful poet, a wonderful singer, and a real good accordion player. And he used to play all the parties. He performed all over the place. And my understanding, just from what I've heard, I've only heard just verbal stories about this. And you can look it up on the internet and research it. There's a big Wikipedia article up, but I haven't looked at that. You guys should look that up. I'm going to look it up too. But right now I wanted to just tell you the story that's in my mind that keeps kind of haunting me about this young man. So Amadé, he had a reputation as being kind of a smack talker, truth teller. And like a lot of people up in the mountains too, and I presume back in England and Ireland and back in Africa, people composed and sang songs about events that happened in their community, often poking fun at people or even accusing people of things. So Amadé had, I believe, a reputation for being that kind of a poet. So he had a lot of friends, he had a lot of enemies. He was a controversial figure in his community. This is back in the 1930s and 40s, so not that long ago. But, well, one night Amadé was playing at a white house party for a bunch of white people. And he was playing so hard, he got so hot and sweaty that a young white girl in the house came up to him and took her handkerchief and wiped the sweat off of his face with her handkerchief. And for that, he was killed. Later that night, when he was walking home, he was ambushed by some white boys who had heard about that or had been at the party and didn't like that white girl touching him or showing her favor to him in any way. So they ambushed him on the road home. They beat him half to death. And then they actually drove back and forth over him a couple of times with their truck. The only reason they didn't kill him outright was that he played possum and they thought he was dead and they left. He actually survived only to die a few months later. So that's the main story that I think most people agree on. That's the first story that I heard about it when I was in my early 20s in North Carolina. And I first started to get into Cajun music for the first time, or Creole music, Zydeco. The other version of that story I've heard, somebody once told me, oh, that story is not true. He was poisoned by another accordion player, is another story I heard. But either way, guys, it's an example of jealousy killing somebody, and I think probably jealousy and racism killing somebody. It's an example that there are many examples of a talented musician being persecuted and actually being murdered for singing, for expressing themselves artistically. This is not an isolated case. I know that this also happened up in these mountains where I live too. People would be killed for singing certain songs that another family didn't like you singing about somebody in their family, for example. They would shoot you for it. So, you know, this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about authenticity. Understand that there's a dark aspect to this music if you didn't already know it. There's some very dark aspects to it. And the darkness can keep you away from other musicians. There's a lot of jealousy out there, and resentment and stuff like that. And when you get the opposite sexes mingling in a party scene, like what happened with old Amadé, there's jealous husbands, jealous boyfriends, maybe even jealous brothers and cousins. And some bad stuff can happen. So that's part of the reason why some people, you know, retract and they get isolated with their music, the way I kind of am now, you know. I'd like to get out and perform more, but right now it's just not happening for me. But anyhow, guys, I wanted to relate that story to you about Amadei. Go look him up. I'm going to look him up now myself and try to learn a little bit more about him, because I've never been able to forget him ever since I heard that story. Okay, guys, well, take care. Thanks for watching.